All right. So this is Brock Edwards and Midlife Mastery Podcast. And you're joining us in actually the middle of a great conversation. So we figured we better hit record here. And so I've got Jennifer McClure. And Jennifer, so you've got kind of an awesome life. You speak, you write, you coach, you podcast. I know I'm probably leaving something out. You travel back in the days when we had travel.
Back in the day.
How do you introduce yourself to people? How do you describe yourself?
It should probably change, but I still identify as a professional speaker. For the last 11 years, I celebrated my 11th year in business for myself or with myself or as myself this last week in February 2021. And I was and intend to continue living the dream. As you said, traveling around speaking and doing trainings and teaching and connecting with people. I tend to talk around the topics of strategic leadership, personal branding, and speaking. So that's what I love to do. Now, has that radically changed over the last year, almost a year of not being able to get out on the road and do those things? Sure, but there are still opportunities to do that, and I'm grateful for every one of them.
Well, and we can talk about that reinvention a little bit. And actually, I wanted to have this conversation with you, Jennifer, for two big reasons. Because I always look for people who are either that we can learn from, who are living an awesome life after 50, or can give good, solid advice on how to do it. And for me, you fit both of those categories. So, I mean, I think you've got the awesome life nailed. Because on top of everything else you did, I know you're well, you're very active with your horses.
Yes, too.
Two horses, yeah. Always posting great pictures of that, and just living a good life. And then, and you are an expert in leadership and personal branding, and so that just seemed like a really good topic around when we think about, okay, so when we hit that 50, 60 beyond, want to just talk about how can we approach that? What do we need to be thinking about? Where do people get in their own way? And so why don't we go down? Well, actually, why don't we go down the first path for a little bit? So leading an awesome life. So what advice do you have? How did you get to a point where you're just living a great life and feeling blessed?
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you. I think I used to, post a lot more pictures when I was traveling and doing the work that I loved. And I'd always hashtag them living the dream because, I was, and again, I'm healthy. And so that's living the dream for anybody. But I think for me, a lot of it has been because I am independent in the sense of I'm single and I prioritize experiences I've learned over the last few years over things or money. I like things. I like money. I need money to have experiences in a lot of cases, but it is not beyond me to say yes to something because I think it's a great experience or I'd like to go there. And so while other speakers or people who've started businesses at the same time as me, now they're $1 million speakers. I was not $1 million speaker yet because I might take a trip to New Zealand for free, not get paid to do that because I'm like, you said New Zealand, that's all I needed to hear. And then somebody's like, well, how much are you going to get paid for that? And I'm like, I didn't even ask. Now, that's not to say for everybody listening that I don't need to get paid. Event planners around the world, please offer to pay me. But I guess I've looked back over the last few years and said, I don't regret those decisions that I made to say, it's worth it to me to live on less and to do more, to be more, to see more. And not everybody's in a situation where they can do that. Maybe they do have a significant other or people that rely on them or that they have to be home for, or maybe even pets that they have to be there for. Thankfully, my horses I pay for it, but they're at a full care facility. So when I'm not there, they're still well taken care of. But again, all of those are, I think, for anybody, prioritizing and really getting to know what you value and then not being ashamed to pursue that.
So tell me a little bit about that. That's an interesting comment. Not being ashamed to pursue that. Where do you see people doing that?
Well, like in my case, people would say, again, you shouldn't take a free speaking engagement in New Zealand because you should get paid to speak. And I'm like, they paid for my airfare and my 5-star hotel. I'll take that because I wanted to go. Or, I think also there's there's a lot of expectations around women and what you can or can't do. And for single people, even especially people like myself, who I've been single for 21 years now, and it's like, you should get in a relationship, and all of this traveling around and being on the road means that you're not prioritizing that. And I guess I've just had to get comfortable with, I'm actually prioritizing what I enjoy. If a relationship comes, great. My son is an adult. He's taking care of himself. And so I did my part to get him raised. And again, I've structured my life to be able to take care of my animals and others. And there are things I could do different, and I'm sure some things I would do different. But, pursuing that without apology means, back to what I said, getting really clear on what you value. And for me, it's, I want to see the world. I want to meet people. I love to teach. I hope to inspire. And I have a message that I want to share. So what better way to combine those things by being willing to come and go as needed?
Yeah, it seems like, so often we don't make those, we don't even think about it. It's like just life evolves over time and we don't really step back. Yeah, when we're young, we think about, okay, what am I going to go to school for? What kind of field do I want a job in? All of that. And then, life goes on. There have been other guests, people I've spoken with that had actually very similar advice. Of course, they're also doing very similar things, but just that, being able to making choices, deciding to live simply in some areas so that they can focus on the areas that really bring them joy, and kind of making those trade-offs. And you're right, there is pressure in the speaking field. I mean, to not take money is a lot of people
let
have
me
some
be
thoughts.
clear. I do take money. I need to take money.
Well, even to choose to not because of other trade-offs, I can see there being pressure there.
Yeah, but it's also, I think, at my advanced years, although I'm not advanced, I'm still young. We were talking before we started recording about how young I am and how young you are. In my 50s, the conventional wisdom would be is that I should really be saving for retirement. And while I have saved for retirement, it's probably not what the financial planners would tell me that I need to save. So there are times where I say, by spending this much on travel or horses or the things you love to do, you do realize, Jennifer, this probably means that you will need to be working well into your 70s or maybe forever. And those are conscious decisions. It's like, I'm going to choose to live my life now. I'm going to trust that the future will take care of me as it always has. And working forever is not a bad thing. I mean, how many people do we know that live their whole lives as a working adult and say that when they retire, they're going to travel? And then when they retire, they're either not healthy enough to do that, or they find reasons why it's not the right time now, or maybe they aren't financially able to do that. And now they don't have, the income to support that. So I think some of it is being conscious of your choices and then owning that. I have to realize that my horses are more expensive than any children ever could be. And by having them and choosing that gives me joy, I will, to say pay the price makes it sound negative, but I will pay the price in other regards. So that's back to, kind of what does society expect of someone my age? It's probably to do less, to save more, to pack it all away for the someday when I'll have the ability to not work. And I'm kind of like, why can't I do both? I'd like to work and also live the life I want to live.
Well, that's a big reason why I wanted you on here and have this conversation. So when we think about other people, so you've thought through it, you've made those choices around what brings you joy and where to focus your time and effort. Now, for others that are, kind of that post-50 career, there's a lot going on. I was just making some notes before we started, and these are all kind of things that I think get in people's way. I mean, one is that we can reach this age and be trapped by our salary. We make plenty of money where we're at, live a comfortable life. And it was much easier to hop jobs in our 20s than it is in our 50s and 60s. And also others have spoken about this, but just our relevancy is perhaps slipping. So you might phrase that another way. We've kind of peaked in our career. We've kind of hit that last promotion, perhaps. Skills starting to stagnate. In fact, I've mentioned this before, but the conversation just struck me so much that I was talking to someone in the tech industry, and they were 50 and felt they were just too old to learn new skills in their field. It wasn't like taking on a new field or anything. It was just even the job that they did. They're just like, well, I'm 50, I can't learn anymore, or something like that. It just really struck me. And also, I neglected brand or never created a personal brand, and as we think about transitioning jobs or doing something different. So that's a lot of negative. That's things that I could picture getting in people's way. But
how many of those things were choices? You shared a lot of those things. I'm not relevant, or I'm losing relevance, or I've peaked in my field, or it's more difficult for me to get a job these days, or I'm too old to learn new things in my field or out. I would argue that all of those are choices.
Absolutely.
There are things, again, it's back to, I think we have to acknowledge our conscious choices. I'm sure, there are things now that I have to do in my job as a self-employed person that I don't like doing. I don't want to do. I don't want to learn. And instead of saying I'm too old to learn that, why did I just say I don't want to learn that? And the fact that I'm having to do it is painful and I don't like it. So maybe I'll take one less trip next year and pay somebody else to do that. Again, those are choices. And I think if we challenge ourselves to reframe things. When I was an executive recruiter, and I'm sure even when I was in the corporate world for 20 years in HR recruiting roles, how many times, though, as an executive recruiter, when I'm dealing with typically senior level executives, did someone come into my office and be like, I'm having trouble getting a job because I'm too old? And I'm like, too old for who? Well, no one will hire me, or I've removed the last 20 years of experience off of my resume or my LinkedIn profile because I'm not getting a job because people think I'm too old. And again, some of that I will acknowledge in some areas that is accurate, that maybe you're not getting looked at for an entry-level marketing role because you've been a VP of marketing. But I also know that the biggest placement I made as an executive search consultant was a 64-year-old CEO. Now you might go, okay, well, he's a CEO, but it was a European company. It was long story short, they were very adamant that they wanted to know how old he was. Because they were European and they said that it was okay there. And I'm like, but we're not. The role is here in America. But he acted and behaved in such a way that they were thrown off by what they could calculate was probably his age based off the number of years on his resume versus how they perceived him based off of his experience that he brought to the table, et cetera. And so when they finally called me and they said, Jennifer, we've figured out that he's 64 years old. Is that correct? And I'm like, does it matter? And they said, well, no, not really. But, and he is still working there. That was 15 years ago. And he is still working there for that company because he was active. He was physically fit. He was vibrant. He was current in his field. He was everything that you'd want to hire in that particular role or in any role. And so I saw it happen over and over again that too many people got in their own way by saying, I'm not getting a job because I'm too old, or I'm not getting the promotion because I'm too experienced. How are you framing that? Are you reframing your expertise of what you bring to the table, especially in today's world where there's now more remote working and more the ability to freelance or the ability to work on a contract basis to pursue the type of work that you want and to build a brand that you want by highlighting what you do well and what experience you bring to the table. Now, some of those things might be, well, if you made $200,000 a year as a senior VP of X and you want to go freelance, depending on your skill set, you probably won't make $200,000 a year. Back to that, it's a choice instead of a jail.
Yeah.
That was a rant. I'm sorry, but and maybe, I say, I joke about things like I'm too old to do that now. And I always try to catch myself. It's not necessarily that I'm too old. It could be something else. It could be that I'm not willing to make the sacrifice, or I'm not willing to make less money, or I'm not willing to relocate. There's a dozen reasons why things don't happen that maybe we say we want, and it's easy to blame age.
I think it's very powerful to reframe it from being an identity characteristic to a choice.
Anybody can build a personal brand today. I mean, yes, I talk about personal branding, but anybody can build a personal brand, and there's someone who will pay for what you want to talk about, to do, to focus on, to have expertise in. If you're willing, it's still going to take work. Again, if you're an accountant in a company, but you would love to be a YouTuber, okay, what can you talk about that you can gain not 100,000 subscribers, but 100 or 1,000 people who really get you and get your message? And then if you create something, would want to buy it from you, or who might pay you to speak on that topic. There are people out there that are interested in everything. And if you're good at something, if you want to build brand around that, you can, but it will take work. It won't. Your YouTube channel as a 65-year-old YouTuber accountant is going to take some time, because you're going to have to find your audience and they're going to have to find you. But it is a choice.
Well, there's an old expression to dig your well before you're thirsty. In fact, it was the name of a book about networking as well. The idea being that, so often we don't start until we should have started a long time ago. But so if we are starting from today, where does someone begin? Like if they've been in a career for a while and they're starting to look around for change, they want to do something different, what's the first step to really start building, emphasizing that brand?
To get really clear on what it is you do want to do and what you bring to that. To just say, I want to change, or I want to do something different, or again, as a recruiter in all areas, I've long loads when people come in and, again, they're the accountant and they come in and they apply for a job as an HR manager because I'm good with people, or I've supervised people before. I think I know people. I'd like to be in HR. Really? Have you studied the field? Are you following other people in HR? Have you figured out what relevant skills you bring other than I'm good with people to the role? Have you talked to other people? So it's back to that. I need to come as somebody who's educated in what I want to do. I'm really clear on what I want to do, and I've pursued more knowledge, a broader network, expertise. I've found ways to volunteer my time to demonstrate my skills. I've chosen to take courses, whether free or, there's a lot of ways. Again, somebody will just say, well, I want to do this. And if you ask them, well, how much money, time, energy, effort have you invested in developing your skills in that? Well, I've worked as an accountant for 40 years and I've had people that reported to me, so I should be able to work in HR. Well, there's also a person who's got 5 years of experience in HR and a degree in human resources and an HR certification, and they're teaching classes at the university on human resources. Who am I going to hire? The person who's deeply invested in what they want to be and pursue. So, the answer is, if you want to change, if you want to do something, then start to build that skill. Same thing when I wanted to start my own business 14 years ago, 15 years ago, I left the corporate world and I thought, well, I'll start my own business, just because that's what you do, right? You don't want to work in corporate anymore. You just want to be your own boss. And thankfully I engaged a coach, which I thought was just going to be like, oh my gosh, Jennifer, why have you not started your own business before? You'll be amazing at it. Instead, thankfully, the coach said, the first thing you got to do is got to sit down and create your own marketing plan. You got to figure out what skills you bring to the table. What are 2 or 3 opportunities you would be willing to pursue with those skills, and then how you can highlight how you've demonstrated those skills. Now, Jennifer, once you've got your marketing plan, you've got to go out and talk to people for 2 months. He didn't say 2 months, but you got to go out and talk to people about those things. Not from the sense of, hey, I'm looking for a job as, or I'm looking to start my own business. Will you hire me? Or I'm looking for a job as an accountant. Will you hire me? But I want to meet with accountants who have transitioned to HR. I want to meet with people who started their own business. I want to say, tell me how you did it. I want to learn from your experience. What would you recommend to somebody like myself who's looking to start their own business after 20 years of a corporate career and never having done that? And thank God, almost all of those people that I talked to, and there were dozens and dozens of them, said, Jennifer, please don't start your own business. You'll fail. Why would I fail? I'm amazing. You will fail because number one, you don't know what you're selling. You're just saying you want to start your own business. Number two, you've never done business development. You are an introvert. You don't want to cold call people. You're saying it was very difficult for you to start this networking process. You've got to build a network. You've got to know how to sell yourself. You've got to know what you're selling, and you've got to have skills in building relationships. And until you have those, you're not ready to start your own business. So there was a lot. If you unpack all that, number one, other people gave me great advice. So if you want to change something, change your career, you want to start your own job or own business, you want to freelance in something, then go out and talk to people who've already done that and ask them not for jobs or opportunities or to hire you, but ask them to share their story with you, what they've learned along the way. And a lot of what I do in those same meetings would be, people would be like, please don't start your job, your own company, go somewhere and learn this. And then I'd say, great, with what I've shared with you about myself, thank you for sharing that. What are 2 or 3 other things you'd suggest someone like me do? Courses I could take, people I need to meet, who should I be learning from or following? That's a way you can start without starting. And then once you do start building those relationships in your new field that you want to pursue, or once you do start learning what made people successful, how many people that I talked to during that time that had started their own company told me, don't start your own company until you've done it on the side first. Almost all of them said, I started freelancing or I started consulting. Some of them did it with their company's permission. Some, like I did, with the company that I was working for permission. I started speaking while I was working as an executive search consultant. They knew it. It actually helped them and me because it was a brand builder for both of our businesses. But I wanted to be a speaker, and I started speaking when I was doing another job. And after a while, I felt like I built up enough of a brand as a speaker that I was able to say, I'm going to step away from executive search and I'm going to start my own business as a speaker because I've built that brand. I've shown people that I can do it. I also have some things booked into the future. So I did what people recommended. Start before you actually are ready. After you've built the skills, the brand, and people think of you, when they think of Jennifer McClure, they think, oh, she's a speaker and a recruiter, or she's a recruiter who speaks or something, so that when I can say I've started my own business as a professional speaker, and they'll be like, so you don't do any recruiting anymore? I'll be like, no. And they're like, great. Would you come and speak at our event? I'm like, yes.
Well, you mentioned something in there, and I want to highlight it just because on top of everything else, I think it's really, really good advice, and I found it useful. And that is when we talk about networking and reaching out to people, a lot of times we don't always know where to begin. And you said something in there, just a simple question of who else do I need to be speaking to?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've used that question, I've stumbled across it and found it so powerful and helpful that it just seems like people want to help you out, and they will point you at other people who are happy to talk to you about this stuff, especially when you're not showing up asking for a job, but just wanting to learn from them.
The truth is, people do want to help, but we've all built up a hard shell over the years because people do networking badly, and I just say everybody in general, myself included, I've done it badly. We are happily employed for 20 years at a company. We don't build out a LinkedIn profile. We never go to a networking event, and we don't build relationships outside of the 4 walls that we work in. And then all of a sudden we need a job, or we want to change jobs or whatever. And we start spamming everybody we know with, hey, Brock, how you doing? Haven't talked to you in years. How's things going for you? Hey, let's talk about me. I'm looking for a job. Who do you know? I'm going to send you my resume. Are you hiring? Do you know anybody that's hiring? And Brock is sitting there going, I like Jennifer. She's cool and all, but I don't have a job and I feel bad. So what does Brock say to Jennifer? He says, Jennifer, sure, send me your resume. I'll send it to my HR person, and then I send you my resume and you never print it off and you never send it to HR because you're not hiring. People want to help, but you put them in a position, or we put them in a position where they feel bad. So your example there is exactly what we should be doing instead. The non-threatening conversation of, hey, Brock, I'd just like to have a 20-minute call with you to learn about how you got to doing what you're doing. And then maybe 2 or 3 people that you'd recommend that I either follow or connect with. that you'd suggest that I start to learn from as I pursue this career? And if I've connected with you enough that I feel comfortable saying, and would you allow me to use your name when I reach out to this person to let them know that you recommended we connect? Those warm referrals will get you further down the line. But everybody, whether you're a job seeker or you're somebody who's wanting to pursue something different, you've got to do it differently. Make those asks non-threatening. The can I buy you a cup of coffee so that I can show you my resume and see if you want to hire me is a conversation nobody wants to have because they don't have a job in their back pocket for you, especially if they don't really know you or they haven't seen you in 20 years. Plus, the cup of coffee thing, I don't drink coffee, but it's super annoying because that's a 2+ hour commitment for anybody to drive somewhere, to have a cup of coffee. It never lasts 30 minutes. You got to leave the office, get out of the office, make it easy. Hey, Brock, would it be okay if I stop by your office for 20 minutes? Just want to have a quick conversation with you, tell you a little bit about what I'm working on, learn a little bit more what's up with you. No asks of you, just wanted to connect. How easy can I make it for you to help me versus if I show up in need, I'm putting you on the defensive because you're trying to protect yourself. You don't want to hurt me, right? Or maybe you do. You're like, Jennifer, I don't have a job for you. Why are you reaching out to me? We don't know each other. That's what people want to say, but they're not.
Well, you're right, though. I mean, either they really want to help and often can't, so that's a hard spot for them, or, well, they don't want to help, but feel some sort of polite obligation to sit and listen or hope that they can help, and turns out they can't. And yeah, there's just so much that can get in the way. So I like the idea of just how do we make it non-threatening?
And also being strategic. Think about your questions before you go in. I always asked for in those networking meetings, I asked for 20 minutes. That's not a lot of time. I offered to go to their office. And then I would be keeping time, whether it was putting a watch on the table or sitting in front of the clock, or at 18 minutes, I'm like, thank you so much for the time you spent with me. I want to be really respectful of your time. If we've been having a great conversation, half the time people be like, no, you keep going. I got time. But I'm going to be respectful of your time, and I'm going to have my 2 or 3 questions ready that are about you so that you like me enough to want to help me.
Well, in 20 minutes is almost anyone can work 20 minutes of time into their day.
Yeah.
Even a half hour sounds so much longer. It's not really, but that sounds like, oh, I've got to schedule that versus, no, I can fit you in. That's fine.
But if I schedule a 20-minute call with you or a 20-minute meeting, and my first question is, Brock, I'm really interested in pursuing, whatever you're doing. If you've started your own business or you're a consultant, whatever, what I'd like to know is a little bit about your story, how you got to be there. Well, unless Brock is just really talkative, he can probably get that out in about 5 minutes. And then hopefully you've got I'm considering doing that myself. Here's a couple of things that I've considered doing. What are your thoughts on, me taking some LinkedIn learning courses in this or pursuing this certification? Do you have any thoughts on that? So I'm asking you softball questions that you can answer easily, and I'm not putting you under stress. And then again, the last question is, thank you so much for the time that you shared with me today. Are there maybe 2 or 3 other people that you'd suggest that I connect with, that you suggest I get to know as I'm on this journey? Then you leave that interaction with a smile. I helped somebody today. And if I've done a good job of talking about you, you like me better.
Well, you think about it, so often our days are tough, and it does feel good to feel like, hey, we had a win. We helped someone, that we had this great conversation. Jennifer left happy. I'm not in a deficit.
She didn't leave me with her resume where I falsely promised to give it to somebody. I helped her, and that's all that she asked me to do, and that felt good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you kind of mentioned earlier, didn't use the words, but we hinted around just kind of, age discrimination, that, it can be a real thing. It can get in the way. I mean, there's laws against it. There wouldn't be laws if it weren't some sort of an issue for some people.
Yeah.
How can we demonstrate relevance? The CEO you mentioned had managed to demonstrate a high level of relevance. And so what are some things we can do? I mean, superficially, we would advertising marketing would push us, to dye our hair and get Botox. I'm not talking about faking youth. I'm talking about, how do we demonstrate relevance?
Well, I'll answer that. I can do a couple ways, but one for sure. When I was considering, I'd left the corporate world. The company I worked for was sold. Kind of found myself out on the street, not wanting to do what I'd always done, thinking I was going to start my own business, thinking I was going to go to the coach who would just confirm that. Once we decided that I had to go out and start talking to people, and one of my options that I was going to talk to people about was potentially going back into corporate HR or starting a consulting business in HR. Neither of which I did, but that was on the table to go talk to people about. And what I said to my coach was, well, I'm actually concerned because I don't have an MBA. So I was at the time in my late 30s, I guess. It was 2000, yeah. 30s, early 40s, something like that. I don't have an MBA. And it's never been a problem for me. I've worked my way up from an HR department of one to a VP of HR, a very successful company, and made a lot of money. The last company I worked for was a turnaround situation. I've done good work. I've gotten consistently promoted. I've been the first woman or the only woman on the leadership team in every job I've ever had. And in the last 2 jobs, the youngest person promoted. Well, that was all about, a little bit about what I tried to shove under that, my insecurity about not having an MBA. And he said, Jennifer, if you go for a job interview where a requirement is an MBA, or you're in an interview where someone says, do you have your MBA? Here's what you do. Your question is, by saying that an MBA is required for this position, is it my understanding that you're looking for someone who can be collaborative and work with teams, who has expertise in XYZ, who has a high level of understanding and skill in this area? Whatever I'm knowledgeable enough to say based off that question. If they say yes, then you can say, well, if I can demonstrate to you that I've done X, Y, and Z, would you still be willing to talk with me about the role? So it's taking control of whatever the weakness is. And the reality is I never did need an MBA to do good executive level HR work. But some people would not have considered me likely for a role because I didn't have one, or even I've never had an HR certification. Ooh. But if I were able to engage those people in a conversation, I could have defended my skills and experience to the nth degree because I had a lot of accomplishments to put on the table. So by asking that question, is it my understanding that by requiring that, or is it my understanding that by looking for a younger person, you're looking for someone who's staying current with technology, who can do the TikToks and the Snapchats and whatever you should know enough to kind of assume what they're looking for by that, then I think you can make a case for yourself. Now, there are, as you said, there are going to be instances where you won't even get the opportunity to have that conversation, or you just won't convince the person. And I know I've said this even when I was a youngster, and I say you don't want to work there anyway. Now, do people need to put food on the table and eat and live indoors? Yes. They need to make money. They want to get job fulfillment. They should have an opportunity to work in their dream job at their dream company. That is true. But if at your dream company, your dream job reports to an ageist, sexist, whatever manager, you're not going to change that. So why do I want it? You won't do well in the job if you got it. You won't enjoy the job if you got it. And it's going to be just a huge bad experience for all involved. Should that person be in the role? No. But you're not going to change it. So go pursue your bliss elsewhere. Your dream job is out there. Just create it.
Yeah, I heard the expression once, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
Oh, I like
and
that.
Always like that. So last question for you as we wrap up here, Jennifer, speaking of honoring time, and that is just, and maybe this is too big of a question, but where do you see people getting in their own way when they're pursuing career change?
Oh, the same way we get in our way in life in general, that imposter. I was listening to a podcast yesterday where it said it shouldn't call it imposter syndrome like it's a disease. It's an imposter occurrence. When you tell yourself that you're not good enough, qualified enough, young enough, pretty enough, you are discounting yourself far more often than probably would be accurate. It comes back to how confident are you in what you bring to the table? How well can you sell your skills? how clear are you on what your purpose in life is and what joy you want to bring to the world? And if you feel like, and I've heard it over this last year of a global pandemic from a lot of speakers and personal brand type people, if you feel like your purpose really matters, that the message that you bring to the world really matters, the fact that you can't do it on a stage is just a problem. You'll find a way to deliver your message because you believe in your heart people need it. So I think, that's a way of saying, I can say, well, I can't be a speaker anymore because there's no travel, there's no conferences, whatever. But if I believe in my message, that leaders out there need to hear my message, then I'll find a way to make them be able to hear it, whether that's, figuring out the YouTubes and the Snapchats and the TikTok, whatever the delivery method might be. So the same thing, I think, is for us as we look at opportunities we might want to pursue. Find out what you really believe in about yourself, and then believe that the world needs you in that role, position, whatever it might be, or even if it's a hobby, but believe in yourself and don't tell yourself that you can't do it or that other people won't allow you to do it until you've tried.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up there, Jennifer. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? I mean, I mentioned that you do a podcast, but we haven't even mentioned the name of the podcast. So where can people find you?
Oh, wow. JenniferMcClure.net is a good place to start. The podcast is called Impact Makers with Jennifer McClure, where I talk to leaders about how they're making an impact out there in the world. And I think my podcast is one of the best kept secrets out there. So if you're looking for some good conversations with really smart people, then I highly recommend checking it out. And I'm on the social medias, the LinkedIns, the Twitters, the Facebook. Facebook. You don't need to find me on Facebook because we're all trying to figure out if Facebook is the evil empire or not. But Instagram, I'm on that, and they're part of Facebook. So, but at Jennifer McClure, you should be able to find me anywhere.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much.
All right.
Well, thank you for listening all the way through to the end here. A great conversation. I hope you really enjoyed it. In fact, I hope you took away some great ideas to apply in your own life. And I'd love to hear about it. So you can hit me up in the comments on the website, which is just midlifemasterypodcast.com, or on Instagram, which is, Midlife Mastery Podcast. And I would love to know, what are you applying? What are some of your challenges? What questions do you have? What topics would you like me to consider covering? And also, my ask of you would be, if you got value from this episode, please share it with other people. Forward it along to other people you know who might really benefit from it. And also, of course, there's the standard, like, share, subscribe. I would love to have you on board and just have this showing up in your podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts on a regular basis. But whatever you choose to do, thank you for joining me, and really excited and looking forward to the next episode. So it's coming up soon.